there you are, Phil. You hear me?
Can.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Hang on just a sec. Oh, we're on right now. Thanks, Angela. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We're winging it. We're trying. This ain't my normal setup. I'm in Florida right now, and I literally put this radio station together in the, 4 minutes before I went on the air, with help from Matthew Hampton and from Ian Freeman. I appreciate it, both of you, very much. All right, so Phil Giraldi's on the line, and you all know Phil Giraldi. He writes for Antiwar.com. He's a contributing editor at the American Conservative magazine. He's the executive director of the Council for the National Interest. He's part of the American Conservative Defense Alliance. He's a former CIA and DIA officer. Welcome back to the show, Phil. How are you, man?
I'm fine, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great. Last I saw, Phil, I've been kind of out of the loop, but last I saw you had a piece at your last piece, I believe it was, at Antiwar.com, is about Obama's next wars in Yemen and Somalia. So as I try to pull up this article here real quick, when you say Obama's next wars, are you talking about American ground forces invading? You think that the Marine Corps is going to put a beachhead down in Yemen and or Somalia, Phil?
Well, actually, the article you're referring to was in the American Conservative, and it was picked up by Antiwar and a number of other places. My most recent article on Antiwar was about the Israel lobby. But anyway,
oh, right. Well, we can talk about that too.
Okay, but anyway, what I had basically been picking up was that the special ops type groups and also CIA paramilitaries have been setting up shop basically in places like Yemen and in the frontline states that are confronting Somalia, like Ethiopia, Kenya, places like that. What they're doing is they're setting up business covers. And what business covers means is that you have people that are, if you think back, the scandal we had, some recent scandals we had with business cover used by the CIA, it's when you don't want to have high profile as being a U.S. government official or in this case, a military officer or anything like that. So you set up business covers. And these business covers are going to be used basically to put U.S. intelligence officers, both from CIA and from the military, and also support officers of various types, into these countries to take action against the terrorist groups there without making it look like the military is present. Right.
Well, there was a story just a few days ago about a helicopter strike in Somalia that no one took any credit for, but it was an attempt to kill the leaders of the Al-Shabaab militia there. Do you think the United States was behind that?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. But basically what they're doing is they're setting up an infrastructure and they're putting in, there are electronic sensors all over that region that are picking up when telephone calls, picking up when vehicles are approaching and that sort of thing. They're putting the intelligence together to be able to strike in these areas, pretty much like they're doing in Pakistan, where they don't openly avow that they're doing it. It's going to be the same kind of capability where it's like a war that's undeclared, but nevertheless is pretty much a real war in every sense, except that there won't be, large concentrations of American ground troops in these countries.
Well, thank God for that at least, right?
Well, I don't know anymore. I mean, this kind of stuff is getting so hazy. It's like, when certainly the founding fathers, when they put the Constitution together, envisioned that war was something that you actually declared and something that you then had kind of an end game to pursue. But these wars are going on forever, and they seem to be involving new countries all the time. And I think it's essentially, I was a little bit nervous about actually writing the article because I didn't want to reveal anything that would hurt American government officials or soldiers or anything like that. But at the same time, we have another series of wars getting cranked up, and nobody's ever voted on any of them. The American public has never been asked whether it wants all this stuff or not. And it's to me, it's almost becoming a public responsibility for places like Antiwar to shine some light on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're certainly right that it's a out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. I mean, if you say the word Yemen to somebody, if you're lucky, they'll picture vaguely the shape of the Arabian Peninsula or something, but the average American, I don't think, can really conceive of Yemen as a place with people on it, like where we live.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. I mean, Americans don't envision anybody as being like them. Everybody else has either a towel around their head or is in some way weird. So, when you kill Afghans or you kill Yemenis or something like that, it's not a matter of great concern. And I think that's unfortunate. We've come into a mindset where we don't realize that all these people we're killing have long memories, and they don't like when we go there and kill their cousins or attack wedding parties and that sort of thing. And this is called blowback, and it's basically we're going to have a lot of blowback for years to come.
Well, I was at the tire shop yesterday and struck up a conversation with a nice old gentleman. He seemed like he was probably about, 65 or something. No, turned out he was 85 and fought in the Pacific in World War II on the anti-aircraft guns being targeted for, I think he said, 17 weeks straight by kamikaze attack. This is a guy who went through real war for America, the war that defines America. And man, Phil, I got to tell you, he was so upset about the empire now. He was so upset about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the war on terrorism in general. And he just couldn't believe that this was what he fought for.
Yeah, well, that's the real tragedy. I mean, people who actually experience war know just how nasty it is. And we have this kind of video game vision of war, unfortunately, most people in the United States. And they can't really associate war. A piece I wrote a couple of weeks ago about we should think in terms of the soldiers that die, both men and women, as our sons and daughters, because they are. And once you start thinking in those terms, you realize, is this worth it? I mean, is it worth sending my son for whatever is going on in Afghanistan, my grandson? And, the answer should be no, hell no. And once you come to that conclusion, you've got to figure out better ways to conduct foreign policy than sending in the 101st Airborne.
Yeah. All right, everybody. It's Phil Giraldi. He's a former DIA and CIA officer. He writes for the American Conservative magazine. Our next wars, Yemen and Somalia, is one of the articles in question here. And, of course, if you just click on his name, he's right there in the right-hand margin under Justin Raimondo there at Antiwar.com. That really was a great article, too, about the grandsons. And I think he said a friend of your daughter's from high school had died, and you had to go to his funeral and see his parents dealing with that. And it's not just some soldier. This is a man who never got to have his life.
Yeah, his life was taken away from him for nothing, and that's true of every single soldier that's dying in these godforsaken places. I mean, it's just to me, we're at a moment in time where people like us and people that are even halfway thinking the way we do, it's time to get really angry, and it's time to really say this is enough. And I'm totally mystified that the progressives, people on the left, have sold out to this Obama vision. Obama is worse than Bush. And
right there, that's a good place to pick this up. Everybody, it's Phil Giraldi from Antiwar.com. We'll be right back.
You can put the Liberty Radio Network on the air in your area. Visit broadcast.lrn.fm to learn how. Broadcast.lrn.fm.
It's all live from baseball to apple pie to bomb. Waco, Texas, Heaven's Gate to Oklahoma bomb. The Desert Storm syndrome experiment that went wrong. Inject our own cause they probably won't come home anyway. Now conflict was a mere experiment, so just came back to the war.
All right, well, and speaking of that, Phil Giraldi, you fought in Vietnam, right?
Well, I was in the Vietnam Army. No, I actually served in Germany, but during the Vietnam War.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now
I didn't kill anybody, Scott.
Well, that's good. Yeah, them poor Vietnamese, man. They sure got the brunt end of the napalm there.
Exactly.
Because if I remember the story right, you were, I guess, officially retired, but you were a contractor for the CIA when September 11th happened, and I kind of wanted to build into picking up where we left off before the break about what Obama's doing is worse and see if I can kind of mix all these things together. You told me before, the war on terror, we need to ramp this thing down. We need to use a scalpel, not a mallet. But that's what Obama says he's doing. He's using a scalpel, not a mallet. He's using drone strikes instead of full-scale invasions. He's trying to take out the bad guys and get this thing over with somehow, apparently. And then part of that question too, I guess, is I guess I can go ahead and assume that one of the reasons you went ahead and left the CIA permanently was because they were taking the exact opposite strategy from ramping this whole thing down. So there's a lot to go over there. Why don't you talk about it?
Well, I mean, let me take the second part first. I mean, the point is that, when you're working for the CIA, you're working for the Defense Department, it's a business. And your business is to keep whatever is keeping you in employment and to keep you, on an upward spiral in terms of more people working for you, bigger budgets and that sort of thing, is to heighten the threat and to make sure that you are responsive to that in the eyes of the policymakers. So, if you think of the Defense Department and you think of the CIA as a business, you understand a lot that goes on. Basically, they're not interested in making threats go away. They're interested in making threats look worse. So that's what they do. And essentially, you're never going to go to the CIA or to the Pentagon and get an honest assessment of anything, because their assessment's going to be based on what's in their own self-interest, So I think that's the easiest way to answer that. What was the other half of the question?
Well, it was partly, why'd you leave the CIA? And then, I guess I was assuming it was really because you saw what Bush, he declared war on 60 countries after 9/11, and that's exactly what you would have told him to not do, right?
Well, yeah, certainly there were a lot of people at CIA, in spite of what I just said, who felt that the policy was a bad one, that essentially we were creating more terrorists than we were killing, and there was no end in sight to this kind of policy. And that's still the case at CIA. There are a lot of people who are honest enough to say that when you kill someone in Afghanistan, you're creating, enemies of all his relatives for the next 30 years. And a lot of people do understand that, but at the same time, the people who run the CIA, the people who run the Pentagon, are people that are not necessarily answerable to the guy that works at the bottom. And the guy at the bottom very often sees things a lot more clearly. Like for example, we used to joke when I was in the Army that if you ever really wanted to find out what was going on in any Army unit, you had to talk to the private, not to the colonel, because the private knew a hell of a lot more about what was going on than the colonel ever did. Right. And if something was really going wrong, the private would be the one able to tell you. So it was, it's that kind of thinking. And there are a lot of good people in government, but at the same time, you don't shoot yourself in the foot. And essentially, it is a business, and it's a business that thrives on strife.
Yeah, well, so now, what about Obama? You say Obama's worse, but isn't he trying? I mean, if you read the New York Times, they say he, maybe he's not acting the way you would have him act, but he's talking like the kind of thing you would have him say, I think. He wants to use a scalpel, not a mallet. He wants to ramp this thing down somewhat, even as he's ramping it up.
Well, Scott, I don't doubt for a second that Obama feels real conflicted about what's going on. But he's a smart man, unlike his predecessor, and I think he really does understand that, these things are kind of endless, and there's no way out of these dilemmas once you get in them. At the same time, he's a politician. He wants to get through this election next month, and he wants to get through the election of himself in 2 years. So he's going to be playing that game too. So he's going to make things look like what they aren't. But let's judge him by what he's done. He's basically not gotten us out of Iraq. We're still there with 60,000 soldiers, and if you read the papers every other day, a couple of them are getting killed. And also politically, Iraq is a mess, and just about every other way. He's escalated in Afghanistan, and if you listen to basically what the generals are saying, we're going to be in Afghanistan for 13 more years? I think that's what the latest Marine general comment was, something to that effect.
So Gates said we're never leaving Afghanistan.
Well, and that's right. And Gates said this in Antiwar today, that Gates said we're never going to leave Afghanistan. So, to me, this and my report about how we're building up infrastructure to attack places like Yemen and Somalia, take it all together. Where is the change? And look at the Middle East. I mean, basically, Obama said the right things in Cairo back just after he was elected, or just after he was went into office, and he's reneged on everything he said. He's come down heavily on the side of Israel. Israel has been intransigent in terms of making any substantive changes, continuing